You're listening to a Pop House Network podcast for developers by developers. Welcome to Java OffHeap episode 62, everyone. Hey there, I'm here on the Java OffHeap podcast with my usual suspects. My name is Freddie Guime. I'm a principal engineer at Expedia Group, Java champion, speaker, author, Seattle Java user group co-organizer, and I'm here with two of my best friends in the whole world.
All right. Well, geez, you really set us up there, Freddie. Bob Paulin, independent consultant from Chicago, Java champion, Apache Software Foundation member, Chicago Java user group board chair. That's me.
That's Bob.
All right. My name's Josh Juno, and Freddie, I feel the same way. Both of you, all of you actually on this podcast. Michael's not here today, but I'm a Java EE, JClarity EE developer by day, author and open source developer by night. I'm a member of the JClarity EE ambassadors, a CJUG board member, Apache NetBeans developer, PMC, and that's what I do.
Yeah. And today we're missing, it shines because of his absence, but our local curmudgeon couldn't make it today, so it's going to be only three of us. We'll try to up the curmudgeonness in his sake. So
it's going to take a group effort, but yeah.
Yes.
We'll see. We'll do our best.
Well, we'll have different opinions, I'm sure. But before we dive in today, I want to thank our sponsor, Datadog. Today's show is sponsored by Datadog, a monitoring and analytics platform that integrates with over 450 technologies. Not 400, it used to be 450. They've been busy, including AWS services, Dockers, and Kubernetes. Datadog's platform brings together metrics, traces, and logs in one place so you can get full visibility in your environment and improve your application performance. With machine learning-based alerts, customizable dashboards, and distributed tracing, Datadog makes it easy to unify disparate data sources so you can troubleshoot faster. Start your free trial today. Listeners of this podcast will receive a free t-shirt once you install the agent and create one dashboard. Visit javaoffheap.com/Datadog to get started. And again, just go to javaoffheap.com/Datadog. We thank them for sponsoring this podcast. It's what keep us the beers full and the mix on and the webcams rolling. So
Cheers.
Give them a try. All right. So let's dive in. The first news, I think that's you, Bob, right?
I don't think it's actually me, but I'm happy to throw it out there because even though we're off heap, we're JVM. So Scala 3 has been released. The experimental language that knows no bounds of breaking existing features and changing to be what it is.
We're already angered all three Scala developers.
You can't tell I don't do a ton of Scala, but 3 is out. I mean, it was several years worth of work. So I mean, is a significant effort, and in Scala, typical Scala form, there's a number of new features and breaking features. It's almost like the anti-Java where, Java works to be heavily backwards compatible, where Scala, every time you upgrade, you get to basically start.
It's going to hurt.
So, some of the interesting features that I was seeing in the release, like not small things. So, they're changing making the new operator optional. So your code can look a little bit more like C++, where if you're just creating a new object, you don't want to specify new. You can just say the name of the object with the constructor and you get a new object. I'm trying to look through the other kind of new things. Josh, why don't you step in and give me one while I try to find my bearings.
There's a new quiet syntax for control expressions. And so it doesn't rely on enclosing conditionals in the parentheses. So basically you can drop the parentheses if you'd like, which is quite nice. They've got different change of type level wildcards from the underscore to the question mark.
That's going to hurt. That one that one there is because I don't think that you can use both. That one is you transition from one to the other, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and a lot of features are actually being dropped. One of the more interesting ones are like one of the first looping statements I learned in college. The do while is no longer supported in Scala. It's a while do now.
Mm.
It's like, you got to know what you want to do, and then you do it.
And then do it for a while. There's definitely a lot of things in this release, and it's probably worth actually doing a Pubhouse episode on Scala 3. So we'll have to find somebody deep in the Scala community to talk about this release, because obviously, with Scala, I mean, the double-edged sword of Scala is if there are things you didn't like about Scala, all you have to do is wait until they upgrade and it'll all change, and then maybe you'll like the next release.
No, and I think it's interesting because like as a language, they we are on one end of this scale. Like we really don't like messing with anything at all, to the point where we create these constructs that are for backward compatibility purposes, right? Like I always think about the way they did default methods in interfaces.
Mm-hmm.
It might have a place, but the majority of the usage was because they were introducing lambdas and they needed to have default implementations. They didn't want to change the interfaces on Java 8, and they decided, okay, the only way to not change the interface, but add new functionality or make this essentially like lambda interfaces or interfaces of only one method or one implementable method is to default the other things using default methods. So that was sort of like the kludge that they did to get it working, right, and not break backwards compatibility, which is, in the face of it, like default methods, it's like, it's kind of weird. It may have a place, but when you see why they did it was like, oh, wow, yeah, that is almost the only way they can, or the best way for them to keep backwards compatibility. Yeah. Like Scala is on the other end where they say like it's almost like if it's a major version, you will have to adapt. And the interesting part is to see like how far they right. And I think what they're doing is they're saying like, we saw these things, we didn't like these things, we love these other things. So we're getting rid of what we don't like and keeping what we like, right? In terms of creating this language. And the interesting experiment there is how much of a pool the community has to endure that pain because of the benefits of Scala. So it's kind of interesting, right? To see that, they know that they're not going to be harming adoption because they obviously keeps doing it. So it's almost like you either get the ones who won't use Scala forever, and the ones that are hardcore users that will always be hardcore users of Scala because they believe on those principles that they ride on. The interesting part to it too is this was so funny because I was looking, I was on a Seattle Java user group meetup yesterday where they talk about this tool called Open Rewrite, which is essentially abstract syntax tree, essentially grep plus sed. So you can essentially do expressions on the abstract syntax tree to for example, I want to find all signatures that are this, and I want you to change it with this on these conditions. So one of the examples that they do is that, which was pretty impressive. Actually, there's two of them now that Curmudgeon is not here. One of them, they take an open source repository and they just took Spring Batch for whatever reason, and I was so happy about it. And it essentially runs for example, there is in the Google style, there is public static. There's an order on first, your visibility modifier, then your return type, and
the style guide, the Google style guide for check style.
And most of them are just nagging, right? Like you go check style tells you, oh, you should switch this. But this here, the Open Rewrite, it had a couple of recipes where you just click on it and it will modify your source to actually honor that. And that was super cool to see it, like doing it like in like you just click a button, you didn't even have to do anything, and the code was formatted the same. It's just that now the things were following the guides, the style. The one that I loved the most that they did was also one of JUnit, because I have a mixture of JUnit 4 and 5 on my projects, because almost you can never really like get it all out. So they say like, oh, transform anything JUnit 4 to JUnit 5, and it just spew out, change for Juniper API when they needed to add it, remove the old JUnit stuff, that put disable where it was, like ignore and all that. And the thing I'm thinking is, and the reason I bring this up is because that seems to be a perfect candidate for something like Scala, where you can have like a Scala 2 syntax parser, and essentially, you can take it and say the transformations to get into a Scala 3 type of compatible syntax. So
I've seen those types of tools. I believe Apache Camel used one going from 2 to 3. I don't know if it was Open Rewrite. I feel it was a different project. Now the 2 to 3, while I mean in Apache Camel terms was a big change, like compared to what you see in the Scala community, is not that big of a change.
We changed something from define to define.
Yeah, but I mean, that is the beauty of the Scala community. They're not afraid to experiment, removing parentheses from if conditionals, removing brackets even from, or curly braces from if conditionals, and adopting indentation. Personally, not a huge fan of that, but there are several languages out there that are doing that. Like, you've got your YAML and you've got
Python. I was going to say Python, but YAML is...
This change reminds me a lot of the change from Python 2 to 3, because that was a breaking change.
Yeah.
If you look at the adoption, though, it took years for people to go off of 2. Some are still on it, 2, 3, but they eventually did it. So
I still have both of them running. Well, you see, the problem is, like, for me, I go to Python like once a week.
Yeah.
Right.
DevOps tool, like, or something, right?
Yeah. I'm not there every day. I think if every day, I'll be so annoyed. I'll be moving to 3 already. But yeah, but I mean, kudos. Like, we'll see how it goes, and hopefully, we wish them the best.
Yes, and we owe our listeners a deep dive into that on Pubhouse. So,
and I wanted to mention real quick that there is a way that you can try Scala 3 online without even installing it. I think the tool is called Scatzy. The link is in the link, which will be in the show notes probably, right? The blog post about Scala 3. You can just go to this webpage and the interpreter is right there. You just start running with it. Another thing that's important is the libraries that are being migrated to Scala 3. You'll want to make sure that you're using libraries that are going to be compatible with your new version of Scala. So there is an index available that contains a listing of everything that's compatible with 3.
Yep. And the other thing is, if you are using Scala, I actually have a client that's using some Scala recently, and you'll notice, your Maven artifacts or your, Ivy artifacts or wherever you're storing them usually have the Scala release as part of the path in there. So, I mean, they've already got kind of conventions worked out that if you're going to stay on 2x and you got libraries that are compatible with 3x, you can do your dependencies in a way that you're pulling in compatible libraries. So, but the main thing is what Freddie said, is the community going to keep up and get those 3x libraries out? That's the piece that I think the Scala community is probably holding their breath on.
Yeah. All right. The next news is we got a new OpenJDK player.
Josh, you put this one in.
Yeah, Microsoft now is in the ballpark and playing the game with the others who have released the OpenJDK releases. So in there with the companies like Amazon, who released Corretto and whatnot. Now Microsoft has...
It's J++, right?
Sure. Visual J++, right?
That hurts. That's a blast from the past.
I bet if I had that box of software, it would be worth money right now.
Oh my gosh. I think I once had like the Visual Studio Complete. I don't know if you remember, like they sell like the CD with all the languages, and there was, I think I actually has it somewhere around this closet. I still have a copy of Visual J++. Never installed, I think, but the CD key still works.
A lot of Java community members there now at Microsoft. It seems like they're on a terror hiring Java resources for the.
Yeah, Mark Heckler is now there.
Heckler is there. You've got Martin is there. Bruno is there. Which is,
I presume that's a big reason why. Like So Martin Bernberg, he runs the Love Java community, and he was the one who pioneered or at least started the effort on adopt OpenJDK, which is the community build of OpenJDK, which is now part of Eclipse, right? That's what you're telling me.
Adopterium, or what is it? Adoptium, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a regular Eclipse project now with, I think it's built around a working group. That's most things in Eclipse Foundation are built around working groups.
Got it.
But yeah, no, they're cutting releases. But Microsoft, so this I feel is almost following the Corretto play, like in AWS. So, if you read the article, and maybe we can include the article in the show notes, Bruno is talking about, they're going to be able to cut releases with enhancements and patches that are relevant to their customers. Basically, you're going to get an OpenJDK build, but if there is, say, a security update or something that they want to backport because they've got customers on Java 11 that need something in Java 17, they're saying, hey, we have a team that's going to do that and backport that fix. I think a lot of it is competing with Oracle. It's having your own cloud, being able to compete with Amazon, who is saying, hey, we have the ability to do this with Corretto and release OpenJDK++, if you will.
And you can try right now, actually, speaking of cloud, if you're an Microsoft Azure customer, you can go and try the Azure Cloud Shell and start using the Microsoft OpenJDK right now.
Which it looks like the black and white command prompt, right?
Yep. That's what it looks like the PowerShell. It's probably important to know, I don't know if we've mentioned it yet, but they're building OpenJDK 11 and 16, it looks like. I don't know that they're going back to 8.
Yeah, I don't see anything about 8 in here. So I think you're correct, Josh, and that as long as you're on 11, you're good with this.
But somebody is making the other play where they think you're going to be on 8 forever.
Yeah.
Or at
That's
least
Oracle, right? Yeah. So the next news item is Oracle has extended the Java 8 support. Now, this isn't the regular support, so don't get your hopes up for being able to download this without paying for it. And this is above the premium level. This is the extended support. So this is you pay Oracle a bunch of money, and we will support Java 8 to 2030.
So in the table of support, Java 17 will be out of extended support before Java 8.
I'll have kids that can come with me to the bar by then. That's
if you were born when Java 8 was which was released in 2014. And it's interesting, right? It makes me wonder, I understand that there is some resonance on 8, but that is essentially 9 years from now on something that already has been technically end of life for what?
A long time.
4 years? Right? So it's almost like they're making a bet that there's people out there that will say, like, you know what, it's almost like cost of doing business. Somebody wrote this in Java 8 and I don't need to upgrade it. I don't need to touch it. I don't need to do anything. And I'm just going to keep using what I'm using and not move. Whereas Microsoft, essentially saying you want to move to modernize your platform, and let's say you want to become a cloud aware or deploy in the cloud, there's like a gate there. It's like, okay, you need to upgrade to 11.
Yeah, when you look at the Oracle license, like, you're probably looking at folks that have a small user base, because it is per server, per CPU is how they've been licensed. And that I've never done their extended support, so I don't know if that's any different than the regular licenses, which they pin kind of to, how much metal you're putting behind it. But, there may be a business case where that makes sense. I don't want to pay to upgrade it.
Yeah. One thing that I'm not quite
right? Like there's combo everywhere still.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I'm not quite sure about is the uplift fee, because there's a 5 asterisks on there, and if you go down to the bottom and look, it says the extended support uplift fee for 7 will be waived from 2019 to July 2022. The extended support uplift fee will be waived for the period of March 2022 through December 2030 for Java SE8. So what is the uplift?
Oh, so there's a way to get it even after extended support is over?
That's
is that the sustaining support, what they call?
Oh,
yeah, I'm not 100% certain on that.
It's like Oracle will make money support.
And I assume this is things like, hey, TLS 1.4 came out or something like that, where we're just
security
adding
updates and whatnot.
Security patches to keep you in compliance.
Right. And then Oracle will, of course, they have their sustaining support that is indefinite on their table. And that essentially is, I'm paying Oracle, fix this for me. And then, then they will always take your money and give you something back. So, wow. All right. Next in the news, Josh, I think this is you.
Yep. So be on the lookout. Jakarta EE 9.1 release is certainly imminent at this point. It is supposed to be coming out anytime. I don't know exactly when the drop date is, but I do know it's Q2. And so it should be coming out, within the next, very soon here. And so just a quick reminder, 9.1 will provide the Java 11 support. That's the main feature. So that's going to be a pretty big update. And then what they're looking to do for Jakarta EE 10, which also does not have a date yet, but I'm guessing it's going to be early next year. That's going to be JDK 16. They're going to target for that. So we're kind of getting bumped up pretty quick here. All of us that are coding on Jakarta EE and Java EE have been using Java 8 for years, and we're finally going to get to start using some of those newer features, right?
Yeah, you're past the package rename and all kind of just the boilerplate. Now it's time to start ramping up those new features.
Yeah, and I should probably throw this out there as well. Thanks for reminding me there, Bob, that with Jakarta EE 10, it's just now, discussion is heavy on it. And I think there is some development that has started towards it. Certainly, however, it's early days. So if you want something in there, now's the time to get involved, get into discussions, find out what's going in, put in your feedback, and it's a good time to get involved.
And that is an interesting question, because like usually you always think about like Jakarta EE 7 was in tandem with Java 7, where it was like Java EE 7, right? They were together. Now they're sort of like starting to drift, right? Because I think Jakarta EE 8 essentially is still 8. Is based off 8, right? It can run on 11. Is that how it?
Yeah, it can run on 11 if you have a compatible container. So Pyara does have a container. They support JDK 11. But
And I think like the thing is interesting because essentially the number of the EE used to denote like almost like the bare minimum of like what you should have, right? Like you should have 8. Mm-hmm. And now it's going to be Jakarta EE 10, but I don't think they're going to like the E 10 probably still, well, like what is the target JVM for or a Java version for 10? Is it going to be?
Yeah, I think I said 16 a few minutes ago, but what I meant was 17. It's going to be 17, I believe. Yeah, next LTS. So That's a good point. Would it have been a good idea to name it JClarity 17? I don't know. That seems like it could be kind of confusing, but for those of us who are kind of used to that, where the name goes along with the version that's supported with.
It's for me, which I have like the focus of a chicken is like, oh, what, 8, 17, what, 10?
Well, I mean, the easy thing is you can always go up and you're not going to collide with anything. You can't go back down after you've gone up, though, because of the chances of running into yourself.
That'll hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe for another time, they'll sync them up, because I believe that Java. So you can't even say the Java releases were following, because they were going to do the Ubuntu thing, right? And I think if you actually do Java -version, it'll still print the kind of year month.
Oh yeah. That's still a hot mess.
But nobody calls it that. So it's Java. It's going to be Java 17, not Java 2108 or whatever. Or is it usually October when it's released? I can't remember.
No,
I think it'll be September.
Right. So 2109.
Yep.
All right. So go play with it. 9.1. Then the interesting we're
getting into our next segments, right? So now we're getting into the more human factor news. So,
all right, yeah, and I think this is it's I guess this is don't know which one of us put it first, but this is essentially make the news. Richard Stallman, loved by many and hated by
many.
He's part of the Freedom of Software Foundation, right? There was a whole thing where we'll put it in the show notes, where Stallman was appointed back as a board member of the FSF, and that generated a big backlash in essentially social media, and it actually forced FSF to put a statement out saying the reasons why they think that Stallman is a good fit for being a member of the board. For those who don't know, Stallman is very controversial because he had, I think, I don't know when it happened, but I know on his past history, he has misogynistic tendencies, or essentially downplaying women roles in tech, and that got him into hot water. Whenever it was in the past, and that was one of the reasons where Stallman decided to just move away from the limelight, from the limelight or the spotlight. But he's back, and the FSF, I think, is sticking on his guns, right? They're keeping him.
Yeah, no, it does seem like they're keeping him. Kind of the statement that was released by them, and I don't want to get too much into it because I know we have our discussion topic where we'll be kind of diving into some of this later. Was that his invaluable knowledge of kind of the history of free software and open source just kind of made him invaluable, where they just. I mean, they basically said, hey, we can't really continue as we are without him, was kind of how they placed it. And that's paraphrasing, but let me see if I can find a direct quote. But
yeah, that's basically what I read as well.
His historical, legal, and technical acumen on free software is unrivaled, is how they put it out there. So basically saying, we need him to continue.
And that is one of the things that I'm always there's two type of leaders, right? There's many type of leaders, but one of the categories they do it is there's leaders that are very centered on themselves, right? And either by because they themselves created that, or it just happened that people love what they were doing and they still want them, but to have it's so risky and dangerous, right? Like sometimes you can achieve a lot of things when you have that kind of leadership, but at the same time, it makes you vulnerable to like succession. Like what's going to happen, because like, Stallman is not just that he made mistakes or he has a problem history, but in general, like these beings are not immortal. So they won't be here forever. So then what happens to the organization, right? Like, it's interesting because the one that I sort of remember is like outside of this, it's like Steve Jobs, right? Like people love him. He was Apple for the longest time, right? And when tragically he had to, he passed away, people were like, okay, Apple is gone. But, like somehow, like, I don't know if it was like he knew that he had to create a succession plan and Baz was very specific of how, what was Apple's CEO right now is still,
Tim Cook. Tim Cook.
Yeah, Tim Cook. Like, like he keeps stirring in that ship and right, and he's still trying to make inroads as only Apple does, right? Like the new play on privacy is an interesting play that they're making, where they say that your data is sacrosanct and we're not going to mess with it. Not like, and then, of course, then it's Zuckerberg gets in the middle of it with like we're not like Facebook. We don't sell your data, right? But it brings to a point where an actual board that had a choice of not bringing him in, still because of that he became that unique to that they found themselves in a position where we just got to bring him in because there's nobody else that can talk like he can, and that. And
you got kind of like a personality cult going on effect, so you've got somebody that is so far and above all the other people involved in FSF that without him, it's a not-for-profit. You need funding, you need, people to believe in your mission, you need to be relevant. And it seemed to me that the FSF without Stallman was not relevant. I guess it's arguable whether they were relevant with him, but so Stallman obviously has quite a following. I mean, he was in Chicago just a few years ago. The C++ user group brought him in and filled an auditorium full of people. And I believe it was at Loyola. It was one of the major colleges in the city of people listening to him speak. And he's very selective about who he goes to speak. Apparently he has a list of requirements of what's necessary to get him in as a speaker. Like it's a well-known thing, right?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, it's
not necessarily money. It's like, you have to take him out to dinner, or there's like, he's got a specification around it.
No, it's almost like the geek solution to that problem is like, I would just document I remember reading it because he said like, if you're between 25 Celsius and 32 Celsius where I'm going to stay, that's fine. If it goes over 32 to 36, I'll appreciate a fan. If it goes from 36 to 40, we're talking air conditioning now.
No, I mean, it's those types of things. And so, I mean, the guy clearly still has a following and I to your point on just sort of the dependence of the SFF on Richard Stallman, I think, it's not a healthy thing for them. And again, I'm coming from kind of a different philosophy. Again, I'm an Apache Software Foundation member, and the Apache Software Foundation is kind of explicitly against benevolent dictator types of things. It's about your community. It's about having a bus factor greater than one. And the fact, and this doesn't even touch on, hey, has he made amends for his past behavior? All blah, blah, blah. If you have a project that can't survive without one person, you're kind of screwed, in my opinion. I mean, regardless of whether he's learned his lesson or not, if the FSF cannot survive without Stallman, that's not an organization I'm betting on for the next 10 years.
Right. Well, and I guess the counterpoint on that one is can the FSF accomplish like what they accomplish if they didn't have somebody like Stallman, for the longest time, right? Like the counterpoint to the argument is some people will say sometimes you need a dictator to get things done. And that's a lot of it. Like, for example, in Sun Tzu, The Art of War, like they explicitly say that the reason why the military is a hierarchy where there's no you're not debating your superior officer is because that's how you win wars. It's like you can't have you can't have Congress deciding, should we do this, should we do that? It's like, no, there's one person that decides, and that's what you can push forward.
Yeah, I can understand that though to some extent for a corporation. Or something where you're trying to, make a business out of it, but for the Free Software Foundation, it doesn't seem like, just like to Bob's point, the Apache Software Foundation, they're not this way where they would stand by a benevolent dictator. And I'm not sure that I don't know much about Stallman at all, so I'm not going to say one way or the other how he is. But I'm just saying, to Bob's point, that if they had to stand behind one person as an open organization like that, then it just doesn't seem.
I don't know. I mean, like you can see. So the question is, where does Stallman sort of like lands? Is he a Linus Torvalds, or is he a like more like the ASF where? Damn, that's odd. Where the ASF where that was not needed, right? Like Linus Torvalds, you can credit him for Linux now.
Well, so I mean, to your point about even the military, so the military is hierarchical, 100% agree. But we have a process for replacing our 4-star generals. We have a process for replacing the commanders of different theaters. Like Linus Torvald has a succession plan of these are the next committers that are going to take over the main line if anything happens to them. So if Linus Torvald were somehow to be kicked out of Linux, and again, this is purely speculative. I have nothing against Linus, but if something were to happen to him, or if he were to get in a position where he could no longer contribute, there are people in line to take over. The fact that the Free Software Foundation felt that they had to go back to Stallman, like you didn't have better options, like you don't have a succession plan. You don't have a plan to move forward. And if this is a not-for-profit, which is, something that requires money and funding and interest to move forward, to remain relevant, you got to have a succession plan, because these are supposed to be interests that are supposed to be around for a while. I'd like to hopefully be well and put in the ground and free software is still around.
Yep.
I agree.
No, and I think it's interesting because it is not like this is like there was enough time to realize that there needs to be a succession plan. It's not like this happened in a period of 3 years, right? Like Stallman has been an FSF staple for the beginning, right? And there was a period where he was essentially he took a step back, and there was enough time to sort of start saying, okay, if we don't see Stallman because of ABC, how are we gonna do this? How are we gonna look like? And that is more on the organization than on. They should have never been to be put in that position.
Yeah, I agree. And some of it is just I think where the Free Software Foundation has just kind of landed with what it has defined itself as too. I mean, like you look at the other foundations out there that are producing code and okay, so is the Free Software Foundation actually responsible for any of the tools, or are those software pieces outside of that? Because I think all they really comment on is licenses. Is it open source or not? I mean, that's how I use the FSF. Is a lot of times they comment, but even Apache has taken their own stance on, hey, these are compatible with Apache and not compatible with Apache. And sometimes they'll reference things from the Free Software Foundation, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's a whole lot that the Free Software Foundation does that couldn't be covered by other not-for-profit foundations that already exist right now, like Eclipse, like Apache, like the Linux Foundation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I always thought their strength was more on the legal side, right? Like it is like lobbying and essentially representing user rights, right? Which is not like, while I agree that Apache and Eclipse can do that.
Well, they can actually. So, I should say Apache can. Apache is a 501c3, so Apache can't lobby.
Yeah.
That is a part of being a 501c3 organization. Now, Eclipse, I think, is a 501. Well, actually, they're in Europe now, so I have no idea what the hell they are.
Like they can do whatever they want.
Maybe they can do whatever they want. I think they used to be like a business league, in which case I think they would have been allowed to lobby. But there's different types of not-for-profits that are allowed to do things like that. I believe the Linux Foundation is not a 501c3. So they have more flexibility in what they're allowed to influence politically. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to my point, I think there are other organizations that can fill that void if they were not to exist.
Yep, and well, we'll see. We'll see where FSF lands. Our second sort of like sort of like in the tech news, but not quite tech, is the story about Antonio Garcia Martinez, and so the story in this was like Antonio Garcia Martinez applied for a job at Apple, and he interviewed, he got the job, or at least he got the offer at some point in time, and then there was a big uprising in social media about the guy wrote like sort of like this book and published this book about not exactly sure what the book was, but it had a lot of comments that were not appropriate for D&I culture. And there was a lot of Apple employees that were essentially saying, I'm uncomfortable working with this person because of the views that they express in a book that is printed. And to the point where a lot of there was a lot of pressure for Apple to essentially issue a response. And I think the response is like, all right, we don't want to deal with this. So they fired him. So, and it was a question of it's not a question, but the story of, you actually get people defending, and I'm sure that happened to someone too, but get people defending him. It's interesting because one of his bigger or more high profile defenders was Paul Graham from, BioWeb and Y Combinator fame, where he's always saying, essentially, he may have written some opinions and stuff, but he didn't get canceled. Like he didn't cancel anyone, right? And he's sort of playing the card or saying that, look, this guy, it's almost like saying Apple vetted him, HR willingly extended a job offer, and then somehow, because there was, he's saying there was this cancel culture around that Apple decided to rescind the offer, and sort of trying to say, and then Paul Graham say that's he's saying that's not right, or that shouldn't have happened. If you his argument is Apple HR vetted this person already. It's easy to find his book, it's easy to find his opinions, it's easy to find everything. At the moment that you stand an offer, that means that the company saw this person as somebody fit to be employed by Apple, and you should not change you shouldn't buckle to the pressure of your other employees for a decision that you're making. And that's sort of the story on that one.
Yeah. And the name of the book, so it is easy to find. I just went to the Wikipedia page on him, and I haven't read it either. It's called Chaos Monkeys. Not a book I've read, so I can't really comment on in any of the material inside the book. But I did see it was one of those things, you wake up in the morning, you're looking at your Twitter feed, and it's like, what the hell happened here? And you look into it, and at the same time, it's like, if you have a public presence and you have opinions and you make those opinions public. So, we've all three of us have spoken at conferences. So we've voiced public technical opinions, that on any conversation, that if we run into somebody on the street, if we run into somebody at a conference that they want to debate with us or talk to us about, like, that's fair game, right? We've gone up in front of people. We've stated these are things that we believe in, and if these are things that we believe in, then if you challenge us on that, it's fair game. At the same time, if I go in front of a bunch of public people and say things that can be interpreted as misogynist or racist or anything like that, the fact that will impact my employment opportunities, well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, organizations are organic buildups of people. And if you have a problem with the people in your organization because you're hiring someone that's potentially incompatible with that culture, and you have enough people that say, I don't want to work with this guy, like, HR is going to side with the organization. You got to keep the organization working. So, I mean, having not read what he said, I can't even evaluate that, but on the basis of is this something that could happen? You wrote a book. You said things in the book that people don't agree with. These people are going to be working with you.
Yeah, the only thing
probably should have been part of the vetting process, but it wasn't. But here you go. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
No, that last comment you made is right on. I mean, that should have been part of the vetting process, kind of, because this was a 2016 book, right? It's not like it just came out. It says in the article that this was a 2016 book. So it's been out there for a while.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's been out for 5 years.
And I mean, to be honest, I mean, that doesn't mean that the HR should have read his book or other people who are hiring should have been familiar with it. At least to the extent of some of these other employees obviously were, but still, it's not like it's something fresh off the press that that he put on Twitter the day before he started, or the weeks before he started, whatever. It's something that's been out there for a while. But anyway,
no, it is interesting because like one comment that I heard that it's sort of like a tidbit that always like stuck with me, like years ago. It's like, HR's job is not to protect the employees. The HR's job is to protect the company. That is what you have an HR department. It's not because you want to represent employees. Like, of course, that's part of the function that they do. But if it comes down to a decision of, am I going to defend this person or am I going to defend the company? HR will usually land on the company, And so then you get to figure out what are the, will there be concerns because this person expresses views and suddenly starts acting them out in his job that he becomes a trouble employee because of that. Then HR will be like, nope, we don't want that kind of trouble. We better just, like nip it at the butt, right? So in that sense, yeah, like it's interesting because technically you're trying to be as, it's almost as politics are everywhere and you cannot live without them, right? Which a third company that is part of our news tried to do.
So, yeah, I mean, we're going to tie all this together at the end discussion. So, I mean, if feels like we're cutting this short, just be patient with us. But yeah, so this one, I believe Michael actually added it, but I was reading this the same time in the morning, just the changes that it's not 20, what is it? 21 signals now. It's Basecamp now.
That's right.
It was signals it used to be. So
37 signals. That's
37 signals. That's right.
Yeah.
So, the Basecamp, which is a company located in Chicago. So it's kind of near, it kind of hits home in a number of different ways because most of us are from Chicago. And then also, the owners of the company, Jason Fried and DHH, I'm forgetting his last name. I just remember DHH.
Yeah.
Wrote several books that I've read.
Yeah, and they were fun books.
And most of them I've found to be very good advice, professionally as a consultant and as an employee. But they've made some recent changes to their company, Basecamp, which is usually the use case. So when they talk about, they write their books and things like that, a lot of times they're citing things that they're saying they're doing at their company. And this blog post that they posted, the changes to the company, was no exception, where they kind of publicly aired, hey, these are the corporate changes we're making. And, again, Twitter blew up because a lot of the changes I think that they were suggesting kind of ran headstrong into a lot of the things that they had kind of stood for before, and people kind of called them out on it. So it's interesting. I think that to lead with the two things that I think hit the heaviest was the no politics at work talk, unless it related to the company. So they did say, hey, if it relates to the company, yeah, okay, we can talk about it. If it relates to the business, then politics are okay. But outside of that, it's kind of don't use our company systems, don't post it anywhere. I guess, if you're talking to your neighbor, then I don't think, they're policing your actual direct speech, but like posting on the company property political things,
it's a no-no.
No mas.
Yes.
The other interesting one that I saw that hasn't gotten quite as much play, at least not on social media, is the removal of what they called paternal benefits, which are the way they define them as benefits that they've kind of put out there to encourage certain types of behavior that the owners saw as desirable. I'm trying to look through the blog article for some examples of that. But instead of nudging personal choices for say contributing to retirement or whatever, they're just going to throw that all into your pay. Is the way they're going to handle that.
Yeah, right. Like I think that they just say essentially no extra benefits. There's just money. Here you go. Here's money, and that
Basically,
way.
Wellness allowances, farmers, market share, continuing education.
So the interesting backstory on that, right? Like the reason why at first the reason why they decided to do this, and or at least the catalyst to it, right? Like apparently what Basecamp have, it was something that you do in a like when you're young and dumb, I guess, right? They have this as a company, you're young and dumb. They have this sort of like Basecamp as a service that is almost like a micro blogging service for businesses.
Well, it's really like almost for project management too, right? Because the only time I used it, and this was years ago when I was at Sears, consulting at Sears, they used Basecamp on some of the teams. And most of it was for, managing some of the agile process, stories, wiki. It was...
Yeah,
it was basically that a content type platform.
Yeah. So and the thing is, like, it's kind of funny because they always say, like, I guess it's kind of funny because I program, I think it's like they're always fighting, like Basecamp's perfect expression of what they do is a text box, because they were like always going like simplify, and they say, and the joke was that one day Basecamp would just be a giant text box. That's as simplified as they can make it, right? But the idea was that they have this internally. They had somebody created, an employee created this list of like, oh, funny names that I see coming on the accounts that are created, right? And somebody have a running list of funny names. And, the beginning was just like weird names that you hear that suddenly started getting a little bit racist. The list started collecting some names that were not really funny. They were just different. And that sort of started blowing up internally. So it's like, we shouldn't have funny names because that's bad. And then they were going back, oh well, it was something that we're doing as a joke. Nobody sees it. And then somebody replied like, look, this is what is called there's a Maslow pyramid of needs where it's like your basic needs are first covered, and you go to more. As you essentially this pyramid, if you don't have the basic needs, then you're gonna go to the next level of needs, right? So basic needs are like food and shelter, then almost like the feeling of safety, the feeling of contributing to society, and it ends up in self-actualization where it's like, oh, you're always learning. That's essentially saying that you cannot get to the top if you're still looking for food and shelter. You don't care about reading books when you're hungry. But they have the same pyramid somebody sent a picture of what is called the pyramid of escalation, where it sort of starts like ignoring a problem, or making fun of somebody by their ethnicity, race, whatever it is, and it sort of like climbs and ends up in the PP top is like genocide. Like this is the most escalation that you can have, right? And this person sort of said that like this is the reason, because of this pyramid of escalation, this is the reason we shouldn't have anything like this. So this is inappropriate to even have started. And I think that's one of I don't know. I think it was Jason Fried that replied back saying like, look, this is too much. This is just he said like, true, we should have done it, but at the end of the day, it's just a list of jokey names, and somebody had a bad made a bad decision, but it's not. You can't equate this to genocide, right? And that person in turn felt attack and filed an HR complaint against essentially the CEO. And when we said that the HR does not work for
protect the CEO.
Yeah. So then it came to HR had to, oh gosh, we have to open the case because it came through all the right ways. And then I guess the easy and best solution to that kind of problem was the CEO saying, well, we can't talk about politics anymore. And that sort of like was sort of like essentially Jason Fried was back in the corner because, he had essentially two bad choices to make. Like the first one is either you make a policy that this will never happen, and the best way, quote unquote, the best way to make it never happen is that you cannot talk anything politics in your workplace, or you sort of admit that, oh gosh, yeah, that was wrong. I should be responsible for it and owning that kind of mistake in a way that essentially redeems the person that actually filed the complaint. So it got to a point where they choose one. They choose, nope, we're gonna go with the way that I'm not at fault, or even if I was at fault, it doesn't matter because we're just not gonna talk about it. And we're forbidding everybody else to talk about it to avoid creating this kind of situations.
Yeah, and so that part of it was actually the most disappointing part for me because having read a lot of their books and seeing how introspective they are, I was kind of the first question I asked, not knowing anything about the situation at first, was, wow, what happened that made them come here? I was expecting something really kind of profound or kind of earth-shattering.
About the CEO.
And this is just like regular company bullshit. To be honest, this could happen anywhere. In frankness, I can see things like that starting off relatively innocently and growing to become bad. And things like that happen inside of companies from 10 employees to thousands of employees.
Yeah.
And this happens every day in corporate America where somebody comes in, whether it's HR, a manager, could even be the CEO if it gets, that high, and just says, what are you doing? Stop it.
Yeah.
Let's not do this anymore. But in none of those situations do they say, okay, well, the solution to this is to create a policy where we don't talk about politics ever again, or where we remove where we change the benefits. some of it doesn't add up. Like, what does this have to do with the benefits that they're offering? Because the thing that really bugs me about that is you've got, like, I read a lot of kind of cognitive psychology and kind of behavioral science things. And a lot of these patternistic or paternal benefits where they're nudging you to do things that are actually in your interest are things that you do at the corporate level. And yeah, okay, you're being nudged and encouraged to do something that you may not otherwise do, but it's not, like what HR is defending the company. These are things that we're trying to encourage you to do because it's good for you as an individual, and it's difficult for an individual to make those choices. So now we're just going to throw money at you and figure that out. You might as well just become an independent consultant like me, and then you get to make all those decisions. People give you money and you get to figure it all out. Like, it's up to me to create my own nudges, but that was a choice.
Yeah.
To have a company kind of revert back like that, I was expecting something a little bit more profound and interesting to lead them down that path, because I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt on it. And it's been really hard for me to do that with the explanation that was given around the client list. It's like, you got to give me a little bit more than that, because I'm not following your reasoning.
Right. Like, it was something dumb that happens every day, and it will have been a non-issue if it was just, you know what, don't do that, and then move on.
Don't do that. Don't do it anymore.
Yeah,
you don't have to own it as a CEO. Yeah, it happened on my watch. You own it just as much as any other stupid thing that happens within your company.
Yeah,
but it doesn't,
It shouldn't have been this earth-shattering, because there was the thing though is, like, this was the nuclear option. Like, I think there's a lot of fallout. There were a lot of, like, Basecamp employees that decided it's time to move on. And I think realizing that that what they did was controversial, or knowing that it was controversial, they gave, like, a nice, quote unquote, nice severance package for whoever, like, wants to, like, if you want to leave because we have a new policy, totes, and go out.
It's like stealth layoff. It's like, hey, we're just going to be assholes and see who leaves.
Like, and then there was, like, a lot of, like, right, like the stance that you take, not politics, not paternal benefits, no benefits at all, which essentially makes you, not even bland in terms of as a company. Suddenly, like, what kind of, like, a lot of people were saying, like, you have a big risk of creating a monoculture, on that, right? Like, you're going to track a certain, because of Basecamp fame, the people that you're attracting now are essentially people that are, like, just freeing, hardcore fans, and you sort of, like, keep that, like, the argument is that now that the people that were trying to, or the people that organically grew into it or grew into the company, they left there, and you put in this sort of, like, changing culture in the middle, you're going to attract people that just follow you. And that is most likely not, like, the argument is it's probably going to look like a monoculture from the outset. Will that happen? I don't know. But
it's hard to say.
Yeah, it is interesting, because one of the things that Basecamp always tried to do explicitly is, like, we don't want to be big. That is one of the things they always live, like, having a big company is, they went on record saying, essentially, having a big company is dumb. Like you always want to be on a space where you're small to medium, because you can still do things. Once you become big, then you don't get anything accomplished, and 37 signals, and this is the reason why some people say that 37 signals is it's a publishing company masquerading as a tech company. Like, the thing they do is they produce books, but they don't grow, and they explicitly say, we don't want to grow. Like, we don't want to grow big.
Yeah, no, I mean, and honestly, it's the whole idea of saying we're limiting political discourse on company software and content management systems, like, in isolation, without this explanation, is an eye raiser, but not like hey, you can't talk politics at work, where I think a lot of that, again, the explanation made it worse. Like, I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt on the initial post, where it's like, okay, so they're saying don't put it on the company's internal Basecamp. I don't post political stuff on my clients' internal Jira's or anything, or Confluence or anything like that. I'm fine with that. But then you add the benefits to it and you add the rationale behind it. And now it's kind of like, oh, you guys really are just like, this happened and this is the reaction?
Your solution to it? Like, yeah.
You should mention a couple of the other things that are listed as well. I don't know if we got into that yet. No more committees.
Yeah.
No more lingering or dwelling on past decisions. And then no more 360 reviews. And I guess this is a way that they did peer-to-peer reviews. Right. So they're getting rid of those. And then lastly, it's no forgetting what we do here.
Yeah. Oh gosh, protect the CEO. That's what it sounded like.
I mean, and again, I think all of those things in isolation, some of them are more harmless. Like, there are cases where I've even seen it with open source projects where a PMC or a committer can become fixated on a past decision. And it's like, really, let's shut this down. We really did have this conversation.
We're moving on
3 times. Mm-hmm. It's time to move on.
Sure.
But making a company policy, again, like making a policy around that, not just making it a common sense thing, just to say, hey, look, like, we talked about this and we came to this conclusion, and we're going to come to that conclusion again. There's no new data that you're adding to the conversation that will sway anybody. Like, that doesn't need to be company policy. That can just be common sense.
Like, yeah, like just talk it out, right?
Yeah. Like, I mean, that there's no rule at Apache that says you can't, like, there's no revisiting conversations, but I guarantee if you go on a dev list and keep revisiting the same conversation, at some point you're going to end up on moderation, or you're going to end up, being asked to cut it out.
It's like the social contract, right? Like, it doesn't have to be explicit, but everybody understands it, right? And I think, it is interesting because a lot of it, they say it was, or at least people are saying that there is this sort of like halo effect, right? Because, these guys, and for a big part of time, a lot of people do look up to them, right? Like, again, the books were good. I enjoyed their books, right? And I thought some of a lot of that advice was like, yeah, this sounds great. We should do this, right? So what happened that they came so like ham-handed on that is like how can you not see, like, you write so much about, like, how to run a company, and a lot of people value that kind of like advice that you gave, that you couldn't even see how are you coming across when suddenly it was, because I think the interesting part, it was specifically him trying to, like, we're going to avoid any, like, essentially, quote unquote, we're going to avoid anyone getting into this situation, but it was almost like, we're going to avoid me having to be in this uncomfortable position ever again, right? And doing policy to sort of like enact that. And
part of me hopes that, to a lot of folks, again, like, and social media, the mob is not, necessarily morality, but it did get a very strong reaction. They have held their ground. And I think it's kind of hurt them. And time will tell what this will do for them. I mean, if it ends up being successful, I sense there'll be another book, but in most cases, I don't see these being successful policies. And my hope is that they'll learn from this, and maybe they'll write a book about what they learned from this.
Yeah, no. And like if there is like a bet that I will do, I can bet, the next beer, like, whatever it is, in a year or less from May 19, 2021, there will be a book on the shelf from 37 Signals. Either it will be owning up to mistakes, or, destroying or what is
how to destroy a company, how to do a layoff without calling it that. No.
Yeah,
Self-service layoffs.
Made. That's if there's a certainty out of this, all of these things, a book will be made. Yeah. And it's so these three things are like tied in together, right? Like we have the Stallman story, we have the Antonio Garcia Martinez story, and we have sort of like Basecamp, and it sort of ties into, like, I think these are things that can only happen in like it is a different time, right? Like I think it's a different time for many reasons, right? Like the first one is there's a very, there was a very dated view about like what D&I looked like, or even it didn't exist, like 15 years ago. So that is one part that changes. In addition to that, we have, essentially a way to the very small, like people that used to have no voice whatsoever before, right? Be these an Apple employee, be these somebody who was on Stallman's run, like end of the abuse, or somebody who was trying to call out the CEO in a small company, suddenly have this power of the power of social media, good or bad. They are things that are now get amplified to a point where it moves companies. Like before somebody can complain, and the only way you can do these things is like you sort of like go out, try to strike out, you get the union people going out and trying to walk out. Now it at least for these particular examples, it's so quickly and so fast to be able to get a reaction that can move at the minimum a response, at most a change, right? And that is something that it's something that we live in a point where first of all, the internet remembers everything, and the second part where you cannot say that, oh no, I run things my way on this part. If you're starting to become influential, and like an influential meaning like people are listening to you, you start, like you said, you have to start being careful on what you say, right? Like if I put in and like in a conference and I say Scala sucks. They don't. That will come and haunt me, and then we have to talk it out. It's like I have to back it up why I say what I said, right? And it is. I think that a lot of people, they're starting to come to that realization where these are different times. Like there's good or bad is here to stay, and I don't think there's a way to sort of like. I don't know if there's a way to put that genie back in the bottle. Like,
yeah, I think in all three of these cases, Stallman, the Apple dude, and Basecamp, you have figures that have used the internet in a way that it is a bullhorn, right? So, you've got Stallman, who is famous for kind of starting BSD and all of the, well, no, he didn't start BSD. I'm probably he started, what is it? The GNU
right?
Project.
GNU, yeah, the licensing model, right?
Yeah, the GNU project, GNU licensing, and was a very early figure and kind of got notoriety around that, expertise around that, and people built structures around his personality, thus creating personality cult. You got the Apple employee, he wrote a book, where he documented his experiences and opinions and put that out there for the world to see. And then Basecamp, you have founders that are being open about how they're running their company and clearly open about anything that they're doing. And, they've benefited from this system that amplifies, what they're doing, which could be for effect. It could be for, trying to show, hey, we're doing something right. Could be even just, hey, look at me type things. Yeah. And now they're being called out for that behavior with the same bullhorn from many different sources from other people, and they're paying the price for that. Now, the thing that I guess I look at it as is there is a price to be paid. They're paying it, but there is also got to be a pathway that if people do actually realize shit, I made a mistake and are willing to own it. And there should be a pathway to redemption for these folks as well. Now, what that looks like, Stallman was out of the FSF board for maybe a couple of years. And I mean, for me, that's a whole other set of problems. But for any of these people, there should be at least some way for them to at least figure out, hey, I'm doing something wrong. But until they realize, hey, wait a minute, this maybe was a bad idea, and can admit that to the rest of, with the same bullhorn that they got all that attention with, you're going to get this backlash, and it's going to happen. And it's not going to stop.
Yeah, I think there's another sort of like cognitive psychology book on how do you walk this path, because it's hard. I have no idea how can you actually do it and turn the tide. Like our brains are wired for discord, and like we remember that because that is like in terms of survival skills. You need to remember not the good times, but the things that could be dangerous to you, right? So that's a problem. Our long-term memory for issues or problems like this or this kind of information is long. How can you say like I apologize, right?
You can even. I mean, there could be cases where the mob is wrong and you're right. I mean, I don't know that any of these cases necessarily qualify. Time will tell, I suppose.
I think
it's probably safe for me to say that.
He's the only one.
It's probably safe for me to say that. But I mean, that's what people worry about with cancel culture is, well, what happens when the mob is wrong and you're actually putting, people that don't deserve this out of work.
Like is the punishment fit?
Does the punishment fit?
Yeah.
And, I think in all three of these cases, these are all three fairly well-known and recognized people that are going to be able to find opportunities somewhere else. So I'm a little less sensitive to that. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think even, in a general case, there needs to be a means of, okay, this person has paid their dues and
it's okay. We can look it back in.
Yeah, we can plug you back into the matrix. You had your timeout. Like, people learn, people do actually change. Like,
yeah, no, that's true. Like, it's not like you're born with all your opinions on day one, right? Like you're allowed to grow, and I think that's also a very human thing to do. But
yeah,
how do you? And that's the problem. It's like, how do you distinguish that from like cynicism and just pandering, right? And it's again, we should have a psychology Java Pop House Daily or something like that. Psychology for geeks.
Yes.
All right. Well, I think that's as far as we go. We are just a little bit over the hour mark. But hopefully, that keeps you updated. If you have a bullhorn or if you have a big bullhorn, lessons learned, just be very careful what you say about it. Or if you're going to say something, be sure that you're really willing to sort of like say, I'm defending this because this is really my position. It's like it's the internet remembers forever. So like this podcast will be on YouTube forever. All right. And with that, we're done with this episode of Java OffHeap. So this is Freddie signing off.
This is Bob signing off. I'll do the Michael quote. Follow us on Twitter @OffHeap.
Mm-hmm.
This is Josh signing off. And remember, you can also watch us on YouTube, right?
Yeah. We have a YouTube video if you want to see our faces made for radio. All right, everyone. Thank you. Happy programming. All right.